welcome back to Chicago, or for those of you who live here.
Welcome back to Latham.
Yes.
So how is filming? How do you like filming in Chicago as compared to other cities like LA or New York?
I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's such a first-rate city to begin with, like, and then on top of that, it's when Fire came here, like, they just flew the doors open and sort of embraced what was going on with the shows, and it's carried through to all of us. I mean, it's the city is so forthcoming with what they're willing to do for us, and they just make it really easy to shoot here, and it's great. I mean, we have this like wealth of actors who can come through the doors because it's such a vibrant art scene with such brilliant actors. So we're never lacking for great guest stars to come and join us.
And this is my first time actually ever being in Chicago. I came, the first time to do this show, so it was a great introduction to it. I think I'm from New York originally, and it's really cool to be in a city that feels like clean. That's one of the main things I've noticed. The streets are really wide, and you can see the sky, and it's, it somehow feels fresh, Yeah, it's a cool
It's a
place
little
to be.
flat, or it's a little more open and a little flat.
Yeah. It's kind of like relaxed, wide, no, it's a great city.
You guys have quite a contentious on-screen relationship. Is it?
We do.
Do you think it's going to stay that way, or is it something that they'll eventually come to understand each other?
I think it's a progression, especially through this first part of the season. I wouldn't say that they completely understand one another, but there is a competitive nature that you never know when it's going to turn into, closest enemies end up being.
I think it's also like because they're both top dog, there's a lot of alpha sort of headbutting, but in the same sense of, there's a definite mutual respect in that, even though they wouldn't show it. I think, it's like the competitiveness comes from a sense of like, we're both the best at what we do, and I think sometimes you can bring out the best in each other because of that.
You can't both be the best at what you do.
No.
Well, I think we know.
But that's the issue.
Yeah, it's amazing because I think coming from Connor's perspective, he's never had somebody to drive him other than himself to be better than what he is already, and it's been an interesting foil to see how that has been progressing through especially this first part of the season. And dealing with personal stuff on the side, and then coming to work and having to deal with this relationship as well. I mean, he's being
She's
pulled in a bunch of
also
different directions.
definitely not the most polite person in the world. Sort of says and does things that most people might not, but might like to. So I think that there's a definite like lack of sensitivity to the stuff that he's got going on, and that obviously makes it even more contentious. But I also think that she really enjoys the challenge. I think from her perspective, it's nice as well to have somebody, because I think from South Africa, being in the hospital, like coming over here, she might not have ever met anyone either who she felt was at her level. So there's a kind of enjoyment in that. I think that she gets a kick out of the competitiveness. Like her idea of a really good time is pissing him off, and like he's really easy to piss off. So I think she enjoys that. So yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges coming up with Robin?
Yeah, it's when we left off with season 2, ostensibly like things were getting better. I mean, we found out what was actually wrong with her, and but of course there's getting better is not an instantaneous thing, and so there's a lot of fallout that happens, and there's recovery and trying to figure out what all that means and what are the side effects from the medications that she's on. How does it feel sort of being a caretaker and a patient from both their perspectives? And it doesn't always work out because they're trying to foster this romantic relationship while also having the dynamic of him having to take care of her as well. So I mean, it's been a really awesome thing to play with this at the beginning of this season. Because it pulls Connor in so many different directions, and that's just on the personal side of things.
So there's one side effect that
You guys have all seen the first episode?
could be pleasurable or
Yeah.
not so.
Okay. Guys, we're on at 10 o'clock now. Getting a little sexier this year. That has been interesting. It's always fun to get the call. Hey, by the way, you're gonna have your shirt off in the first. So okay. I think that's it raises questions for Connor of like, what is the disease and what's the actual relationship? And I think that's really what they were trying to get at with all of that stuff, and everything going forward is, how much is actually their relationship and how much is a byproduct of what she's going through personally.
And it played really well in that first episode, I think, because like her being a doctor, she also knows once she thinks a little bit that she maybe have a pause. And that played really well that she's concerned too.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think that was one of the fun things about it, was that it's not just him recognizing things about the relationship or her disease that is complicating things. It's also her self-awareness that really feeds into the drama aspect of it. It's just, it makes things difficult.
Well, Ava,
You're a big Cardinals fan.
Huge.
And how does it feel being in Chicago where the Cubs are doing so well?
What a brutal question. I'm happily a Cardinals fan living in Chicago. I was very happy that they finally got their first World Series win last year. I should probably stop talking.
Who are you rooting for in the World Series?
I'm actually just excited that it's been a great World Series so far. I have no horse in the race, and I'm just happy to sit back and watch as a baseball fan.
Have you been to Wrigley Field since you started working here?
I have. It's awesome. It's like, it's one of 2 ballparks in the States now that actually maintains that old school vibes. That and Fenway. They're the last 2 standing. They're incredible places to watch.
And you didn't trash it when you walked in?
No, I was even very nice. I took off my Cardinals hat. My wife and I happened to have Theo Epstein's tickets for a Cardinals-Cubs game, and so I was very polite. Yeah, I know. Why'd you let a Cardinals fan sit in your seats? No, it's great. I love being here. It's a great sports town. Going back to what we were saying about Chicago in general, like, there's such a mutual respect for each other, and if you're a sports fan, you love being in Chicago.
are we gonna get a little bit of personal life for Ava, or is it?
I hope so.
Okay.
I think that we're slowly starting to develop the character and understand where she comes from. There's a pretty cool backstory episode at one point, and I think that the interesting thing about her is there's definitely an abrasiveness, and there's definitely a kind of like she's a tough pill to swallow. But I also think that she's a lot more caring than she lets on necessarily. She's the kind of person who doesn't mince words, likes to rile people up for fun, but then would be there for you in a second if you really needed help. There's a kind of grounded element that I think is coming out more and more, which is nice.
Has Colin taught you his stitching techniques?
we have some great on set medical experts to learn
He
all
was
that
pretty
stuff.
good last year. You were pretty good.
No, it's awesome.
I don't think anybody wants me teaching them, though. Not when we have people who can actually do it.
But it's been so much fun getting to learn the medical stuff. That's been one of my favorite things about this so far. I think is just the insider's scoop on all the surgical techniques and everything. It's been really cool to learn.
So, a little unrelated question, but do you have anything to say about Arrow and possibly? I'm going to Vancouver next week to set. So,
Awesome.
Any line or two you want to say about Arrow?
Oh man, I can't give anything away. I continue to love the show, and I love them, and they've been so kind to me over the years. And if the opportunity ever were to arise, I'd be back there in a heartbeat. But it's busy here so far. Yeah.
Had to ask, sorry.
Of course, no.
I like too how you guys play Otto's character. Like you used him kind of, well, she uses against himself. So we see that kind of continue the different approaches to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, certainly one of the things that gets under Connor's skin right away is seeing somebody manipulate a person who's, who he's come to such a great understanding with. Obviously, Dr. Latham is a bit of a tough nut to crack, and can, because of who he is and what he deals with, and he doesn't always pick up on cues, and so he can be manipulated. Sounds too strong, but it's he can be swayed in one direction to someone's personal gain.
I think actually, I don't necessarily think that, I think Ava, again, she says and does things that most people wouldn't, but not in a way that's actually malicious. I don't think, I think that, she has a lot of respect for him, actually, and wouldn't shy away from being like, he's weird, but not because she hates him, but just because he is, and no one else will say it. And I think that, as the episodes progress, we develop that relationship a little bit more. There's a kind of unified, I think there's a mutual respect for him for sure. And I think that, if in the first episode especially, there is a moment of manipulation, but I think it's mainly just to screw him up rather than to screw Latham up. I think he is her senior, and she's a very rule-driven kind of person and comes from a very, very rigorous training background in South Africa. So, you don't screw with your superior in that sense. And I think that she does respect him.
And then karma comes into play.
Exactly.